On the edge of Blackwood Moor, a bleak stretch of land covered in thick fog and shadowed by towering gnarled trees. There was a legend whispered among the villagers of nearby Stonemoor. They spoke of a creature that roamed the moors at night, a phantom of light, leading the unwary traveller astray. The locals called it the Hunky Punk. It was said to appear as a flickering lantern, bobbing through the mist, distant and elusive, but those who followed it, driven by curiosity or the promise of safety, would soon find themselves lost in the deepest part of the moor. Many never returned, and those who did were not the same, their eyes hollow, their minds broken by the horrors they witnessed. Sylvia, a young woman from Stonemere, had heard the stories her entire life, but she was no believer in such superstition. After her father's passing, she decided to leave the village behind, seeking work in the bustling city. But the journey to the city would take her through Blackwood Moor. The evening was cold and damp. When she began her walk, the mist rolling in thick and fast from the horizon. The village had warned her about the moor, but Sylvia had always prided herself on her practicality. She didn't have time for fairy tales. With her cloak drawn tightly around her shoulders, she set out, the muddy path underfoot becoming more treacherous with each step. As night fell, the fog grew denser, the air was damp and heavy with the smell of earth and decay. The only sound was the squelch of her boots in the wet muck. Just as she was beginning to question her decision, a soft glow appeared in the distance. It was faint at first, like the light of a distant lantern. Sylvia, desperate to find her way, quickened her pace, believing it to be a traveller, or perhaps a cottage tucked somewhere on the edge of the moor. But as she drew closer, the light flickered and bobbed erratically, as though it was moving on its own, floating just above the ground. It danced in and out of her vision, disappearing and reappearing, as though teasing her, leading her deeper into the mist. Her breath quickened, but the thought of turning back was swallowed by the pool of the light. She had to know what it was. The glow led her further into the moor, and soon the path was lost entirely. The trees around her grew, twisted, their branches reaching out like jagged fingers. The light seemed to move just out of her grasp, keeping her on edge, luring her into the unknown. Her feet became heavy, the weight of the fog pressing down on her chest. She was no longer sure how long she had been walking or how far she had travelled. Time seemed to walk in the eerie quiet of the moor. Then the light stopped. Sylvia found herself standing in a small clearing, the dense fog swirling around her like a living thing. The light hung motionless in the air, just beyond her reach. She could hear the faintest whispering now, like the rustling of leaves or perhaps the breath of something unseen. She reached out towards the glow, her hands trembling, her heart racing, and then she saw it. A figure appeared in the shadows, dark and twisted, like a silhouette carved from night itself. Its form was half hidden by the mist, but there was no mistaking the shape of it. It was tall, impossibly tall, with long skeletal arms that seemed to stretch out towards her. Its face was hidden beneath a cloak of darkness. But there were eyes, glowing eyes, that watched her, hungry and cold. The Hunky Punk! Sylvia's breath caught in her throat as a sickening realization set in. This wasn't a friendly light, nor a guide. It was a trick, a lure. The figure's hands reached towards her, impossibly long fingers brushing the edge of her vision. And, as it did, the fog parted just enough to reveal something she had not noticed before. A pit in the centre of the clearing. The ground around it was blackened, as though it had been scorched. The pit itself seemed endless, a gaping maw of darkness. She tried to turn, to run, but her body felt heavy, as though the very earth had become alive to keep her in place. The whispers around her grew louder, more insistent, and the lantern light blinked in and out, its glow flickering like a heartbeat. "You shouldn't had followed," a voice hissed, a sound that came from everywhere and nowhere, all at once. Sylvia's heart raced as she struggled to break free from the invisible force holding her. The figure loomed closer, its glowing eyes locking onto hers. It grinned, its mouth stretched unnaturally wide, revealing row of sharp, jagged teeth that gleamed in the dim light. It was no longer just a shadow, it was a creature, and its hunger was palpable. The whispers grew louder, and Sylvia felt her feet lifting from the ground, pulled towards the darkness of the pit. She screamed, but the sounds were swallowed by the thick fog. The Hunky Punk reached for her, its cold fingers brushing her skin, and in that moment she felt a wave of despair wash over her. The air turned frigid, the fog swirling with unnatural force. By then, as if by some twisted miracle, Sylvia managed to break free. She wrenched herself from the creature's grasp and stumbled backwards, her heart thundering in her chest. The light flickered one last time, and then disappeared, leaving her in complete darkness. For a moment, she stood frozen, barely able to breathe. Then, without thinking, she ran. She ran through the fog, through the twisted trees, not caring where her feet took her, just desperate to escape the grasp of the Hunky Punk. The air was thick with whispers, but she didn't dare look back. She could feel the eyes of the creature on her, following her every step. The path was gone, lost to the fog, but she ran anyway, pushing through the pain in her legs, her body on the verge of collapse. And then, just as she thought she couldn't run another step, she broke through the mist and found herself back at the edge of the moor. The village was just in sight, but Sylvia was never the same after that night. The next morning, she was found by a villager, her eyes wide and hollow, her skin pale as death. She muttered incoherently about a light, a figure in the mist, and a pit that would swallow her whole. Her body shook with fear, and her hands trembled as though the cold still gripped her. The villagers knew the tale of the Hunky Punk all too well, and they knew that once you saw its light, you could never truly escape it. Some say Sylvia still wanders the moors, lost to the fog, forever seeking the glow that once led her astray. And on moonless nights, when the fog creeps down from the hills, the flickering light of the Hunky Punk can still be seen bobbing over the moor, waiting for the next soul to follow.